Okay, great. So, when you were doing this meditation, Terry, of going down to the earth, it reminded me of a practice I was doing years ago where in medical Qigong we have a practice where we call Zhen standing like a tree. It's one of the most powerful things you can do, just to stand and connect. And be with the power of your body in that process. Anyway, when I used to do that, I was living in town at the time, and I would literally just send roots down and down and down, and it would really almost be a mechanic of the path, watching every inch, every foot of the way to make sure it didn't get stuck somewhere or something like that. And in a way, that symbolizes my work in that I'm a mechanic of the energy body. I'm intuitive. I'm empathic. So I can feel what's going on in other people as I'm working with them. I might be working on a shoulder issue, and suddenly I feel something going on in their knee. And so I'll start looking at the relationship of the two and just really look at working the whole mind-body as a puzzle of what's causing what, and how do we unwind or pull away the triggers that are causing problems. Sometimes you have to rebuild and add energy in too, but from my perspective, the majority of healing is really just removing triggers. And that's what I consider my specialty to be, is I remove trauma and sensitivity reaction triggers. And I came to that via odd directions. Originally, 32 years ago, I was in an intensive personal transformational program, a year long. The whole thing was about 25 hours a week. And I kind of had my awakening moment in that period where I went from being very unconscious to suddenly having a conscious flow with life and the world around me. And my abilities to be empathic started to wake up then, as did the intuitive abilities. And then a few years later, I was working on my wife as she had a headache at the time for 3 days. It wasn't going away. And I was massaging her, and we were down on the ground on a blanket and had to reposition. And as I took my hands off, I suddenly felt this really odd field of energy, like a balloon around her head. And so I started playing with it, and as we all know what happens, the headache goes away. And so I then over the years started doing this with family and friends. I had the setbacks of stuck energies coming to me that took a while to recuperate from. So it was kind of an on-off kind of thing. And then eventually I learned about medical Qigong, which I studied with Dr. Robert Carpenter in Albuquerque, which is basically an ancient science, an ancient art of the energy body and how to work with it, to deal with all the kinds of things that affect the human body and health and well-being. And it kind of gave me a science to my art. And I say that because I look at myself more as an artist of healing, although I have that science to kind of lean on a little bit when I try to process and understand what's going on. We look at things like the meridians. You think about them with acupuncture, but they're a lot older than acupuncture. They came from people who are empathic, like some of us here, to feel that you're working on the shoulder and this lights up and you follow it. And you suddenly get to understand the flow of energy in the body. And that became the extraordinary meridians, which are below the meridians, and then the meridians themselves, which we more commonly know about. And so that's kind of like one of my lenses of seeing the body and understanding of how to work with things. Like I'm working with somebody with fear, for example, and first I'll notice if they have anger. I'm working with someone with anger, for example, and first, typically starting a session, I work to release the fear, because what I found is I could work for all day long, and if they're in fear, we get nowhere. So, within the first 5 to 20 minutes, I will definitely attend to fear if that's an issue that's going to hold them from being successful in the healing journey. And then from there, I just kind of follow the signs. I feel like what they're feeling in their body, I might feel it at 0.01% in mine. And I'm so sensitive that it just tells me that something's going on. And it's not even just one kind of feeling, there's many kinds of feelings. So it's like I could read the details of this whole dynamic. I can read if it's inside the bones. And it's pretty fascinating when you tell somebody, hey, what's going on inside your bone right there? And they look at you and said, I've had 1 million doctors look at that and nobody's been able to see that before. And then I go and, in most cases, I can help them deal with it. Because basically what pain or illness is a stuck energy or inflamed energy that's causing a series of reactions. So when we go back to the core of our blueprint, our patterns, we could then begin to get a sense of what's going on. Just like we have the meridians of the body, we have meridians of time. We can go back and I can mention 3 years old and, just feel the person I'm working with as they sink into whatever trauma they had at that time period. And I don't really care if they know what the trauma is. I have no interest in getting into details with them, although some do share if they know. I have nothing against that. It's kind of a dance, the healing process. And so as they go into that space, I'm watching of what's going on, where their energies are dipping. And, whether if it's a grieving dynamic, maybe, intuition might tell me a grandparent died or a friend moved away. It's amazing how traumatic a friend moving away, a best friend at 3 years old can be. When we talk about trauma, I know in psychology, and I'm not an expert in this, but they look at an event as a trauma, a car accident. To me, I look at a car accident as a whole series of, I believe the word is traumatica, money traumas. You have that moment of shocked reaction, like when I almost had an accident a few months ago where, it was pitch black at night and a car came over the hill on the freeway in my lane at 80 miles an hour, I was going. And it's like, my first trauma was I went into denial, reaction. No, this can't be. It's like, fortunately time stood still. And, then I came back and had to make a decision. And, next thing I knew, I saw their mirror there. But there was a whole process. Now, in that case, we got out okay. But there was actually more to it because the trauma of that experience was quite potent energy. And when I found out the next day that the person who was a half mile behind me got killed in an accident with that person, it really brought a whole lot up. So this is a series of traumas and the whole process of what went on from there. But let's take a real accident. If someone who had an accident survives, they have those moments that I talked about. They have the moment of gone through the windshield, flying through the air, landing, the whole series of what happens as they're being rescued and being worked on with surgery. Those were all little trauma moments too. And so to me, a trauma is the whole series, and I look at it as a series as opposed to one event. A car accident might be 1,000, 10,000. It doesn't really matter, but it's like the old cameras. You have these little stills of shots. And so this is what I work with, is the whole series. I look for the energetic pattern and try to help lift the whole pattern off or see what else is going on in the body and release it. It could be any number of things. They went to the hospital, they had an allergic reaction to the medicine. I can go on and on and on, but this extent of trauma, whether it be that or abuse situation or what I call primal trauma is one of my favorites to work with. I define it as the first major trauma after birth. that a person has. It's often after they're out of the arm stage, so they're on their own on this one, and they often go into a kind of like I want a sense of hiding like a cave, hands over head, for often a couple of years, until one day they said, "I have enough of this," and they return to kind of living life again, but with this filter in front of them that they had from the event and living in the cave for 2 years. That's one of my favorites. Afterwards, when I guide them to understand they're safe now, the trauma's been removed, I support them to recognize that they can lift up their head and look around and see that it's safe, and actually stand up and work their way out of the cave, whatever the cave looks like. It's different for different people. And then out into the world and, smelling nature and really reconnecting with the fullness of their life, of who they are, without that very significant event. As I said, that's my favorite of all. But